All right, everyone, welcome back. Another edition of the History Buffs presented by the Kirk Minahan Show. Joined once again by the last OG standing, Ned Snark, R.A. Minahan, who we don't know is considered an OG anymore. We're not sure. And then Austin from New London. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Hello.
How we doing?
Welcome back, Austin.
Yes. How's the connection, Austin? Good?
How's your service doing?
Sound pretty good today.
Any relationship updates or anything? Or
anything like got going on? We want to share with the
by Fort Haley.
We're already off the rails there.
And we're gone. And we're gone.
History Buffs episode 7. We're talking about we're so giddy this evening because we're talking about the age of exploration.
White people discovering places where people already lived.
That's right.
I'm pumped.
Correct.
That's right. Discovery.
Let's discover some brown people.
Annihilation. Yep, exactly. So talking age of exploration here, we had some differing of opinions what that meant for this show. And Ned, we might go back in time at some point, but for this show, we're going to talk about the age of exploration, the golden age, which is, if you watched a couple episodes ago, we talked about the Renaissance. While all the stuff in Europe was going on, we also had the age of exploration starting up. So we're talking 1400s to 1600s, discovery of the New World, right? RA, discovery of a world by Westerners, by Europeans, where again people already lived. And then the systematic enslavement and takeover of the various countries for their resources, and then lead us to where we are today. So with that brief summary, I'll jump in and start with a couple countries.
Okay, ignore it. Just keep going. Ignore it.
I'll start with a couple countries, and then we'll go around.
I figured out how to use banners for those who aren't understanding why this is so funny.
Producer RA learned how to do banners, and that's why we started recording about 20 minutes later than we wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll jump in right off the bat. I want to talk about Portugal, and I want to talk about Spain. So to me, Portugal and Spain kicked it all off, or the modern age of exploration, modern, I guess, for the 1400s. You have Portugal and Spain both go into South America. Also, you heard about Christopher Columbus or other explorers as well. The big financiers of those two countries, you had Prince Henry the Navigator for Portugal, and then King Philip in Spain. So both countries started exploring around Africa, into Asia, looking for different trade routes with Asia. That's how it started. Eventually, they will go west and then discover what they think's Asia. It eventually turns out to be South America. You're going to have the Treaty of Tordesillas. Has anyone heard of the Treaty of? Yep.
It splits it in half, right?
Yep.
Correct.
In half, what they thought was in half. So
Correct.
Treaty of Tordesillas splits South America in half, allegedly. For whatever reason, the Pope was involved in that.
Yep.
It splits it between Portugal and Spain. And really, Portugal gets screwed here because they get Brazil, essentially what's modern day Brazil, and then Spain's left with the rest of South America. They didn't know it at the time, but it turned out Spain essentially takes over all of South America, most of the gold mines, most of the silver mines, and it really kickstarts Spain's economy, really the first world economy, because they had trade networks from South America to Asia, from Asia back to Spain. They're really the first international global trading network starts in the early to mid 1500s. So you have Spain. Go ahead.
KDL, just to underscore, the Pope was involved because it was a discussion or a conflict between Franciscan Spain and Jesuit Portugal. So the Jesuits were very militant, very savvy in the ways of the world, not like a good, nice priest, but very savvy in getting in secular matters and toppling regimes and all in the name of Christianity. So when the treaty divided Brazil and everything west of it, I think it was west, it included Asia as well, except that the Spanish had the Philippines.
Yep.
So that was their only niche before the treaty, so they got kind of grandfathered in. But the Portuguese had Macau in China, and they got, according to this treaty, they got Japan as well. So it was they got stuff they didn't realize they were getting until they were discovered. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So
yeah.
It was an interesting. The Pope had to split it, and it was between two actually Catholic factions.
Yeah, I didn't realize there was a religious component to it. I figured it was just another.
I'm sure the Pope got a sweet bit of action.
Yeah.
He didn't lose.
another worldly action by the Pope, which led to the Catholic Reformation. We're not going to go back down the Renaissance rabbit hole again. If you want to watch that, go back a couple episodes ago. So Spain and Portugal kind of kicked this whole thing off. Ned or RA, I don't know if you want to talk about either of you want to talk about France and Britain and the reason they were a little late to the party, or if also wants to jump in as well. But a lot of countries get involved with the New World, and France and England at the beginning weren't part of it.
No, this sounds like a Ned. Sounds like a Ned question.
So the original rise for Spain and Portugal is because they were competing for the spice trade with the merchant cities in Italy, the city-states in Italy, specifically Venice, but Genoa as well. Those spices were brought overland previously from an unknown area, which turned out to be the Indonesian archipelago, right? So it was brought by boats to the mainland of Asia and then brought on the Silk Road. So once they and they were brought by those coming from the east, going to Constantinople, and then trading. The Phoenicians made a shitload of money, controlling all the spices, meaning your peppers, your saffron, the stuff that we take for granted today that now grows everywhere else. But at one point, there was only one tiny island that all the nutmeg in the world came from there. It was the only place where they had nutmeg. Now it's all over the place, right? So they had to break that because it was so expensive and so costly. And the way they did it was the Portuguese did it through the auspices of Prince Henry the Navigator, who died in Gary, Indiana in 1987. And his benefactor, King John II of Portugal, who was he was unbelievable. He actually financed Vasco da Gama to actually come around the Cape of Good Hope. And once they got around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa into the Indian Ocean, all bets were off. And now the Portuguese were in Asia, and they were pretty good at setting up forts along the way. And of course, the Jesuits followed them, and they Christianized those people, or tried to. And that's how they got very rich, by breaking that trade grasp that the Italians had. So fast forward not that long, but fast forward maybe 50 to 100 years, and suddenly you have the British privateer, which was a private organization not funded by the state at this point, and the Dutch privateers, who were also excellent sailors. So you had two countries that were really good sailors, and they saw how much money the Spanish and Portuguese were making. Now you're also coming into the Age of Reformation, so you've got the Protestants versus the Catholics. The Dutch and the British were also both Protestants. So it became like a religious war and a trade war for dominance. And with the fall of Constantinople, the overland route now became completely run by Islamic nations, and they actually stopped trading with the West at that point.
They shut down the Silk Road.
Correct. They shut it down. So now this was the only way to get that stuff, that incredible wealth of spices and other goods too. But really, the spice trade did it all. So that was the rise of especially the Dutch and the Brits, and they combined and teamed up and actually ended up defeating them both in a trade standpoint and then militarily. Right.
Yeah, they were late to the party, but once they got going, Spain's golden age ended before the 13 colonies in North America were set up.
Probably we're going to start like 1588, 1589, 1588 Spanish Armada.
Yeah,
1588. Armada, 1588 was probably the turning point for the Spanish Empire, at least.
And it was, and also around that time too, R.A., the Elizabeth, and one of the last things she did before she died was she created the East Indian, it wasn't called the British East Indian Company. I think it was called the English East Indian Company. The Dutch did the same thing a few years later with the Dutch East India Company. Two organizations that made it until the 20th century, by the way. Although the monopoly of the British East India Company was broken in the mid 1850s, but it still was in existence until the 20th century. So the difference was you had the crown running two operations inefficiently, right? The Portuguese and the Spanish were, a bloated bureaucracy, and you had private companies with the crown sponsoring them, or government sponsorship. They were running it much more efficient, and they just kicked their ass.
It's really an early example of capitalism on an international scale, is what it really is.
Private business.
Yep. All right.
I think Ned just, explained the spices. He explained he got his spices in. He was very concerned about not being able to talk about spices. I told you to be able to get it in. But I don't know.
All right, get back to everything.
He really just did everything.
Well, also the Portuguese also controlled the trade between Japan and China, and that was the silk trade. So Japan needed silks for everything, because that was the best clothing to wear. It also keeps you very warm as well, which I didn't realize until I read up on it. The Chinese had the mulberry bush, the mulberry tree, which was a state secret guarded. Don't let the mulberry bush out of China, because then they lose the silk monopoly that they had. But the Portuguese, specifically the Jesuits, were making piles of money acting as middlemen between like the Japanese and the Chinese. And you had these, they called them black ships, and they would be loaded with goods and going from China to Japan, and then gold, silver, and maybe trinkets, because China then, as they are now, are not a big importer of anything. They like to export. They're an export nation. They always have been. They're excellent traders, but they don't really buy much. And even today, that's still true. So that was and the Dutch broke that hold as well. And then after the Battle of Sekigahara, when the Tokugawa shogunate steps in, only the Dutch were allowed to trade in Japan through.
And Hiroshima was the port of welcome,
or Nagasaki, I think.
Maybe it was Nagasaki.
Yeah.
It was some city that got bombed.
Yeah,
I remember.
Yeah.
So I guess my first question for the night is, and also we'll start with you. We talked about the Dutch, talked about the British, haven't touched on the French much, but they were basically fighting with Great Britain a lot of this time, and obviously fighting not just physical battles, but also battles for economic battles as well, trying to get land in the New World, just like everyone else was doing. So we have the French and the British primarily, and the Dutch a little bit too, primarily in North America. You have the Spanish and the Portuguese in South America. Spanish start to creep up into Central America and really up the West Coast at times as well.
Yeah,
in North America as well. But by 1600, the early to mid 1600s, you have 5 European powers, I'd say, competing in North America and around the world, but primarily in North America for this new world, for the resources, for land. My question is, which nation had the best result from this age of exploration? So again, you could say Britain might be the obvious one, but then they lose all their land eventually with the American Revolution. So thinking all the way forward, which nation do you think had the best result from this age of exploration?
I still think it's Britain, even though they lost all the land during the American Revolution. I think the impacts of their conquest throughout the world, throughout Africa, throughout the Pacific Islands, it impacted the world all the way up through the 20th century. I mean, British imperialism was prevalent all the way up until World War II. And we're talking about the Middle East next week, but it greatly affected relations in the Middle East, is their imperialism, them and France. But I think Britain, had the most effect on the world leading up to today, for sure.
All right.
I'm gonna say long term, I'll agree with Austin with Britain, but short term, I'm gonna say Spain. Like you kind of
every time this guy, every week.
Yeah, it's weird when you pick the obvious ones, but like you were saying though, like they got the Inca had all the silver mines, the Aztecs had all the gold. They went in there, the conquistadors, and they just took everything. And I was reading up on it's called the Spanish Requirement of 1513, and it's kind of like their coverall to kind of like absolve them of liability for what they were about to do. So that what they would do is the Spanish would show up and they would talk to the natives in Spanish and be like, "Hey, we're just to let you know, you better accept Spanish rule. If you don't, we cannot be held responsible for what happens to you." And they were given okay, you got to either agree right now or no. And of course, these people didn't speak Spanish, so they were like, "What?" And they're in Spanish, like, "Well, fair game, we warned you ahead of time." So they literally just ran in there and just did whatever they wanted without any real, it gave them legal, it gave them a legal clean slate. It gave them morality, a clean slate. I just found it funny because they would speak it in Spanish. They don't understand Spanish, and they were just massacred. But yeah, all the golds, all the silver, all the slave trade, I feel like in the short term, up until like 1588, I think the Spanish were, the wealthiest nation in Europe. I think they really benefited the most from it. But Austin is right about long term being, because that led into British imperialism, which, up through World War I, they were the most powerful country in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then imperialism lasted through, the end of World War II.
Then?
Wild card, Sweden.
Sweden.
Yep. They grabbed the most valuable parcel of land in North America, what we know today as Delaware. I'm all done.
Why?
Yeah,
No,
I don't need to justify it. I just picked one.
Why Delaware?
I'm only joking. The long term is, of course, is the Brits because of the way the war came about too. I had to do something.
You got us.
That's right. It wouldn't be the Dutch because they got kicked out of New York. But no, the long term is the British because of I'm saying because of the language, because even though we went to war with them for independence and we were not very friendly until after the Civil War,
right.
We did adopt most of their customs, and we were predominantly English settlers at the time, so the language
culturally there's no question.
It's like Mexico, exactly. So, but if we were in Mexico, we'd have to say the Spanish because it's our culture would have Spanish descent or Spanish influence. So, I think Spain is probably the most disappointing because they had the most to gain and they lost it the quickest. And I think it's because of the way it was being run back in Spain, where you had a middle class. And we still had too great of a disparity between the middle class and the merchants and the nobility and the poor. The poor were still desperately poor, even though they were literally pulling shiploads of gold out of South America, out of Mexico and Peru and Colombia as well, by the way. So their fall was pretty rapid, and they couldn't control their colonies either. Even though it lasted a little bit longer than the U.S., they lost all control of their colonies.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna talk about that a little bit as well with Spain. The way I read it, though, or at least the way the stuff I've looked up, the different sources I've seen, is I see that more as like a systematic withdrawal kind of from the New World. Whereas Britain was kind of trying to hold on to everything they could with the 13 colonies and leading to the American Revolution. I saw it more as Spain eventually was like, screw it, we can't control them. Let's try to continue to suck the resources out that we can, and we'll get out when we have to. But I didn't see it as much of a struggle, a fight between Spain and their colonies as I did with Britain and obviously their colonies.
Well, Bolivar fought in five. I mean, he's considered the father of Latin America. In 5 countries, he liberated from Spain. So, I mean, I think I'm not sure about that because I think that they did resist.
Okay, I was thinking more. Okay, I mean, again, they had.
I think you're thinking more of like North America.
Yeah, so I was thinking.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, that because I've seen the same thing where it's just kind of like they sort of like Florida. They were just kind of like, oh, all right, like
we'll
sell it.
I mean,
and even the West Coast,
and the West Coast, like they got their ass beat by the Comanches. I know Ned is big into the Comanches, and but
the problem too is like Napoleon was working on installing. He was working on installing his brother in Spain. So they needed the money. They needed the cash. In 1819, they sold the property. They sold Florida to the United States. So they needed the cash, and they lost control of Mexico when they overthrew Napoleon's brother, who was the Emperor of Mexico. That's Cinco de Mayo. So
right.
So they took their own fate in their own hands by tossing out the French overlords, and then Spain couldn't hold on to them, so they went independent as their own country.
Right.
But they made the mistake of attacking the U.S.
And the other thing I'll say about Spain real quick is that we didn't really touch on, I guess it's not just Spain, it starts with Spain, but the slave trade. And the slave trade is a huge, really the biggest reason this all happened is the slave trade. I mean, think about it. They were getting literally mining money with gold, literally getting money for free because slaves were mining it and then putting it on ships, loading it up, whether they were African slaves or native slaves that were captured in South America. I mean, the Spanish were really the first to do it on a mass scale. Portuguese did it as well in Brazil, but the Spanish were really the ones to kind of do industrialized slavery. Is that an okay way to say it? Sure. I mean, they part of their world economy was obviously the first real slave trade, which leads to Britain and France and the Dutch doing the same thing. And obviously we know how that eventually turns out, but it really kickstarted the Europe's economy as a whole in the coming out of the Renaissance.
They literally wiped out, the peoples, the different peoples, the Carib Indians, the Arawaks of the Caribbean, just through interaction. First of all, bringing them into slavery, and then just exposing them to viruses.
Diseases, yeah.
Oh yeah, they wiped them out. They
wiped them out.
I
So
think
imported from Africa.
and I went to the oh god, there's a Native American museum out in Harvard, Mass, over by Fruitlands, and one of the displays says that within 100 years of European contacts in North America, 90% of the native tribes in the eastern seaboard, 90% of the Native Americans on the eastern seaboard were wiped out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Within 100 years.
Most of it from disease.
Oh, almost smallpox blankets. It'll, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And to put that in perspective, have we talked about the Black Death yet? A little bit? May have touched on it at the beginning of the Renaissance, but the Black Death wiped out roughly 50% of Europe's population.
Yeah.
So just about half of what happened to the natives in, after the start of the Age of Exploration.
But there's also a lot more people in Europe at the time.
Right.
But have you guys ever read, and I've only read a little bit on it, but have you ever read accounts that they estimate that there might have been a pandemic across Indian nations within 50 to 100 years before Jamestown and Colombo, after Columbus, because Columbus was down further south, but Jamestown and Plymouth, like in the 14th or 1500s, they found evidence of a lot more Indians in North America than there were when the colonists in Jamestown and when
they took Samoset as a slave back to Samoset's the one who greeted the Pilgrims when he landed, and he spoke English, and they were like, "What the hell?" Right. So he was taken prisoner, and his people, someone's gonna fucking kill me. Anyways, his people were all wiped out. Like he was one of the last of his people to survive because there had been fishing expeditions and. What's the guy's name?
There's been some contact with them.
There had been contact, no permanent settlements, but they had made camps on Cape Cod and stuff like that. And just by contacting these people, they spread plague. And they said there was a huge pandemic, within the couple decades before the Pilgrims even arrived.
Right, and there are accounts by white settlers that they say when they reached the Ohio Valley, they found fallow orchards and fallow farmland that obviously was cultivated a long time before because the trees were cleared and it was just overgrown from lack of use. But it was definitely someone had been there and was cultivating fields that were no longer there. The other aspect is the Abenaki. They were from up in Maine. But and speaking of that, up there too, they said the reason why the Vikings couldn't get a foothold is because they were simply driven out of North America up there by the native people because they were just overrun. And that's kind of unusual for Vikings. They usually kind of handle themselves.
Oh yeah,
they can.
You'd think.
So just something to that I don't know where we went with this, but the Indians. I think there was a.
Oh, you want to go on a tangent with Native Americans real quick? How did Europeans advance so much more than Native Americans over 5,000 years? Like when they contacted Native Americans, they were still in the Stone Age.
Stone Age, correct.
They had Stone Age tools. They had a Stone Age society. What happened? What's the difference? What's the missing link?
Austin.
Awesome. Austin, your thoughts?
I have no idea.
Gunpowder?
Well, why didn't they develop gunpowder?
Yeah.
I just know because obviously it started with the Chinese, and then the Silk Road helped move it around Asia into Europe as well.
The horse.
Well, that's right. They didn't have
horse.
the horse either. Yeah, the horse wasn't native to America.
Oh, just food for thought.
Or maybe they just.
Oh, you don't. Wait a minute. You don't have the answer.
Yeah,
I don't have the answer.
Well, put that in your banner down below. Why was it?
I was typing it out, but I just stopped halfway.
Oh, I was waiting for an answer.
Oh, I don't have an answer.
Yeah, I was too.
Tune in next week.
Idea.
Tune in next week.
I'm looking for serious advice. I don't know. I need answers to this question. I think those opinions.
I think the horse. I think the horse is a major influence.
Really?
And when you think about how fast the Indians learned to adapt the horse, like we're talking like a generation, 20 to 40 years, 2 generations.
The Comanches.
All of them.
Yep.
But they all did. The peoples of the Great Plains were unbelievable. Yeah. They were like Mongols. Dothraki.
Horses weren't native to America?
No.
Jamie didn't know that.
Yeah. They were introduced by the Spanish.
Oh, shit.
Spanish Mustangs.
Yep.
So, all right. So that's the brief brief summary of the Age of Exploration. Per usual, we can go anywhere with that.
Some deep wars.
Per usual, who the hell knows where it's going to start or end? But moving on to today. Moving on to today, we want to talk about different sorts of colonization going on today, and today spans back, call it 100 years or so, the 20th century and on. I think we have a few different places we want to touch on in terms of modern day colonization, impacts it's had, or impacts it might potentially have in the future. Ari, I thought you had a pretty cool one. You want to start with that?
So the last discovered lands was in a polar desert archipelago in northern Russia. It's on the bottom of the strings. I can't pronounce it, but that was in 1913. That was the last major chunk of land to be discovered.
And what do you mean by major? What are we talking about?
They are large islands. They are hard to miss.
But they're Arctic, so you couldn't do anything with them, correct?
No, it's a polar desert. Like you can't live there. You can't do it. So there was really no need to discover it, I guess.
Well, okay. Well, today are there like oil fields there or anything like that? Are there any
probably? I have no idea. If there are, I'm sure they are trying to at the moment.
I imagine they would. Yeah.
And when did Edmondson find the South Pole? Was that 1911, 1913? I thought around the same time, right?
Yeah, it was before. I mean, it was
not that far before.
No, but let's see. But that, yeah, I can't find it. I'm trying to Wikipedia.
Okay. Two-Star is losing it here, losing his touch.
I'm losing my touch. I'm usually good on this.
Go ahead, Ned. What were you saying?
Nothing. We were into the 20th century, so vast swaths of Africa, were just finished up being mapped and closed out. There were still pockets in Indonesia, like in New Guinea, and in Brazil. Central Brazil was also not completely mapped out, and not everything that we know today was found.
1911.
1911. There we go. So I was right.
2 years before they discovered Severnaya Zemlya.
Correct.
Well done.
But I think the last
those who can struggle with math.
And I'm asking this like RA's question about the Native Americans and the Europeans. Have they mapped out the entire floor, ocean floors, and the Pacific? And
nope. Only 5% of it.
So only 5%.
Only 5% of it. Oh, wow. Yep. We know more about the moon than we do about the Earth oceans.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And do you think more of the moon?
Do you think we'll ever?
No. Ever? That's a long time.
Yeah.
I don't think in our lifetime.
Yeah, there's too much. There's too much pressure, and then the darkness. Once you get down to the bottom, it's just too hard to figure out how to do it. You probably create like some kind of sonar way to map the bottom of the ocean, but like
you have to do really strong.
It's not going to be. It'll have to be really strong, which will probably kill like whales and all other things down at the bottom of the ocean, all their life forms. But it won't be specific enough for like what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
So, I wonder if that's just a distance thing, because have you seen that? I'm sure we've all seen like the different ancient history shows, and when they go back, let's say looking at like Mayan ruins, to keep it on topic here, they're looking at like ancient Mayan ruins. Where was this temple? Where did the temple used to be? Obviously, it's all overgrown by jungle, and it's buried under dirt and vegetation, all that. They do use sonar mapping to like go down in the ground and look for ancient buildings underneath the Earth's surface. So I wonder why that same thing. Is it just a distance thing? There's too much.
I think it's. You're talking about like 5 meters compared to 30,000 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Through and I know like water, like sound and everything goes like faster through water, but it doesn't matter when it's that deep.
Tough to get into penetrate. Yeah, that far.
Yeah. Also, like the farther you go away, if it's sonar, you're getting it's when the sound waves bounce back to you. So if it's that far away, who knows what you're bouncing off of at that point?
Yeah, there's no
exactly.
You're hitting the bottom.
And you've got the Mariana Trench is the deepest point in the ocean floor, 7,000 feet deep.
30.
I was gonna say more than that.
7,000 meters. 7,000 meters. Sorry.
Yeah.
So and that's what we know of, right? Because we haven't been there. But when you look at like the underwater maps of like the Hawaiian Islands, and we can talk about how instrumental those discoveries were. But there are like so many. They actually stretch to Midway Island.
Oh yeah,
and they're literally the peaks of a huge mountain range.
Oh yeah, Midway's the last, Midway's the last
in that chain. Interesting. And that's hundreds of miles away too. That's not.
Oh yeah.
What's it? The Hawaiian Emperor Seamount? Is that what it?
I think that's
chain
what it's
is?
called.
Because the hot spot. All it is just the hot spot's been traveling over millions of years.
Yep. Yeah.
But they
And
also have
that's when
phantom islands. I read about because of sea level rising. There's actually been islands that were charted like off there, like in the Pacific, that were there in like 1813, and they come back to look at it, and it's gone. But you can see it under the water.
Wow.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, so phantom islands do exist, so you maybe be able to rediscover places
That's true. That have already been discovered. Keeping on topic. Exactly.
Keeping on
Right.
topic.
So talk about colonization. I want to talk about Mars a little bit. I mean, I think we agree that colonization isn't really happening in this planet anymore. I don't think that necessarily counts when it's China building their own islands doesn't really count as colonization. Most 99.9% of all the land on Earth has been spoken for at this point, right? So with Mars, I think it was Steve brought it up. Spaceman Steve brought it up on the show this past week. What do we think that's going to look like? I mean, does it have to be, for example, like private companies like Elon Musk and SpaceX? Is that something that has to go? Is it going to be China out of nowhere? Is it going to be a country? Is it going to be even something that's going to happen in our lifetimes? What do we think?
You're not going to have a colony in our lifetime. You may have like a settlement, maybe like kind of like what they have at the South Pole, where it's just like speaking of the South Pole, just like a science laboratory. Like I don't think you're gonna have like people over there like living there, because you'd have to make it habitable. Otherwise, you have to build a giant dome, and the U.S. government's not gonna sink money into that. I don't think.
Yeah, I think colonizing Mars is going to look a lot more like the space race than like the age of exploration. I think you're going to have companies trying to figure out, first you need to prospect Mars. You need to figure out where you want to colonize Mars. So you're going to have you're going to have private companies, I think. So that'll be like the one connection to the age of explorations. I think it's going to be done by private companies. What they'll be doing is first try to create the technology, like rover technology, to prospect Mars, see where the best place to colonize is. And then once they figure that out, then you're going to have them competing with each other to create technology, to life support technology that they can live on Mars, and then just the space travel technology. I think it's going to look a lot more like the space race against the Soviet Union, and it could be against China or the Soviet Union. I'm not sure. Like my other thing with colonizing Mars, like the need to colonize Mars, at least the way I interpret it from other people, is that they think Earth is dying, so we want to go to Mars to create a colony where we can live outside, where like the age of exploration was economics. We're going to go there, we're going to export the resources and bring it back to our home country.
Yeah.
Where I don't think that's going to happen with Mars.
Right.
What's the point? If you're going to Mars because you think Earth is dying, you're going to keep your resources there so you can build up whatever civilization you're creating there.
And it's already dead.
Exactly.
If anything, you'd be exporting resources from Earth.
Yeah,
to Mars.
Correct. That's where, because I think we missed the window for Mars, because Mars was very similar to Earth in the sense that the planet, like Earth, has a nuclear reaction that goes on at the core of the Earth, and it's an incinerator that's creating energy, and the energy comes out through the electromagnetic field that surrounds the Earth. Mm-hmm. It's been determined that core, and by the way, when the Earth burns out, when that nuclear fusion stops, it'll become like an iron. It goes back to the basic element of iron. So there'll be an iron ball in the center of the Earth instead of molten lava, or molten like we see now. It already happened in Mars. So that's why they're totally exposed to the sun's rays and the sun's force. They have no atmosphere to protect them. It would have to be, I think RA was actually right. It would have to be more of a settlement than a colony. And I think you'd have to send people out there in I don't know, in shifts and waves. You go out to Mars for 10 years. By the way, we'd have to get there faster than we do now too. So propulsion would have to change. But you'd have to be committed to go out there for 10 years and then come back 10 years later. And then a new group goes out for 10 years. That's a lot. That'd be great. It'd be cool to do, but I think that's beyond us at this point, simply because we'd have to recreate the environment.
You'd have to have like a man-made greenhouse effect almost to make
it. Yeah, is that what Steve was saying about terraforming it like that? Basically, create your own ozone?
We're not there yet. We're not there. I mean, the Martian movie
was
great, but right.
I mean, terraforming would take, I think, millions of years to actually work, but
correct.
Still, I mean, you could start it.
They're not even sure how we were terraformed, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, I don't think it's reasonable to expect us to be colonizing Mars anytime soon.
No,
I agree.
An outpost, absolutely.
No, maybe.
That's a long way to go, though. We got to get there.
An outpost for what, though? Just for further space exploration?
What's the purpose?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's the thing too. You're saying about it, like it matters if the Earth is dying, but if we do when the Earth is dying, it almost feels like it's too late. And again, that's going to be hundreds, thousands of years away. It's not we're not even anywhere close to that. So it comes back to the question: is what's the point? What I say, thousands?
Yeah, you said hundreds of thousands. It's going to be like tens of millions, hopefully more.
Well, the sun is what we expect to last another 5 billion years before it goes nova.
Yeah, so, when it goes nova, it's just going to swallow the Earth.
Exactly, correct. And actually, I think all the close planets up to Saturn. So
I think it's only up to the asteroid belt. It's only the inner ones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so maybe we'll colonize. I don't know, one of Jupiter's moons.
Maybe.
I mean, at that point, we better have like intergalactic capabilities.
Correct.
I'm hoping, a couple billion. I don't even know if the human species will be around in a couple billion years.
I think it'll
correct.
be
highly doubt.
Because we've only been around for like 200, maybe 400,000 years.
Right.
Like Homo sapiens. So
correct.
Yeah. I think it's more probable the human race gets wiped out in our lifetimes and we get like a settlement on Mars.
We're gonna
I think that's more probable.
Oh yeah. No,
what has this devolved into?
The science buffs.
Yeah,
the science buffs. No, an asteroid coming. We're overdue for an asteroid strike of the
gamma ray
that took out the dinosaurs.
Oh,
that was only 60 million years ago.
Well, then Steve's favorite movie could come to life, and he could go to the asteroid.
He can design the spaceship,
and he can put a nuke in it and blow it in half.
Right
so
in it.
Sure, go across. Armageddon, baby.
What an odd conversation that was.
That was
like
strange.
Well, I was going to design it, and then I was going to fly because no one else would be able to fly.
Then immediately,
mind you, that's the reason he applied to MIT, mind you.
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
He was just like, a lot of people know that I want to be a spaceman.
Yeah, a lot of people know it.
It's well known. That's why he applied to MIT.
I keep going back and forth between whether I think Steve is the most normal person on the show or not. I can't decide.
He might be the most probably the most level-headed.
I'd say most stable. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
He's the most stable.
He's definitely a wild card.
But
he's strange.
He's absolutely a sociopath. There could be a freezer full of, he could open up like one of those books behind him. Just a layer pops up. Like, would not surprise me at all.
Yeah.
Not one bit.
Secret passageways in the house and all that.
So Austin mentioned too about intergalactic travel. So Einstein, what? No,
let's keep going.
Are we not doing this?
Go.
You want to wrap it up?
No,
we're talking. Okay, we'll wrap it. The world is going to end in our lifetime. There we go. Good night, everyone. You guys said the world is going to end. The KDL said, I think the odds are more in favor of the world ending in our lifetime than getting. Yeah. So like,
like the odds.
The odds.
Yeah, I'd say there's a higher chance that we get wiped out than we live to be a couple more million years.
Oh, million? No, that's not what we were talking about. Like getting
yes,
to
it was.
travel. Getting to travel.
Not even settlement.
I think it's likely that like some non-political actor gets a hold of a nuclear bomb and sets it off somewhere, and then we go into nuclear holocaust or something like that. Like that's, I think, much more realistic than any other end of the world scenario.
And then a new life will replace us.
Yeah,
as new life
terraform Mars.
That's right.
Terraform.
Is there any? What do you think they're doing with Voyager? Just out of curiosity. I know Ned had that in his show notes. He wanted to go from the Phoenicians to Voyager.
Voyager, baby. Yeah.
We could. This could have been a 6-hour show.
Well, it's gone, right? It's outside. It's gone past the Kuiper.
It's outside the heliosphere.
The heliosphere, exactly. So it's like now entering into what, as we know, deep space.
Yeah. But what's the point of it?
But it's continuing to transmit.
That's why I want to know.
This is why space doesn't.
What's the point?
Yeah, this is why space is always seems superfluous to me. It's like once you get far enough away, we don't have the technology to efficiently gather information. They're gonna this will send like signals back like 100 years from now. It's like I guess that's cool. It just seems pointless to me.
What are they? They're not even. I don't understand it. I just don't.
I agree.
I'm sure there's some. I'm sure there's some scientific reason why they're doing it, but
I like the idea that we send something out beyond any of ours. We're never, your children, they're never going to see it. It's going to be coming back, sending back data hundreds of years for the next hundreds of years, and we're going to be analyzing it. Who knows what it's going to find or not find,
or who it'll.
I feel like there's a lot more nothing than stuff in
there
space.
There's going to be a lot of nothing.
Some might say there's a lot more nothing than.
Hot
something
take.
in
You didn't
space.
see any, but you didn't see any point in all the passes it made to all of the planets on its way.
Oh no,
out.
no, I
that was
get that.
fucking cool as shit.
I'm sure it was back in the 70s, but
No,
now
they just did it, dude. They just did it.
But now it's just like floating off into space. Like I just don't get
Yeah,
it.
but that wasn't the 70s. That was like a few years ago.
When did it launch?
Oh, it launched in the 70s, but I'm saying it just sent back data on Neptune.
Oh, I know. It takes 9 years to get to
it was so
Pluto or
fucking
whatever.
cool. No, longer than that, I think.
But it's also like they just sent out new horizons, just did Pluto, and it came back with like awesome imagery.
Phenomenal.
It's supposed to just like a
rains diamonds on Neptune or something.
Yeah,
that's cool shit.
I'm fine with that. I don't know how that helps me, but
that's
cool.
Something else you didn't know. It's the increase of knowledge. The fact that your father, your grandfather didn't know that, and that you do know that's where I see it's worth its value.
What about Venus? They found like bacterial stuff on Venus.
Yeah.
I mean, Venus is pretty hot, so
Venus is
I don't know if that's going to be a good.
Well, Steve was all excited about that life found on Venus. True, but it's like what kind of life? Yeah,
it's like this. Yeah, he said there's stuff like the vents, like the hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean. That's like hundreds of degrees Celsius.
Yeah, and I think the air is like methane or something. The atmosphere.
It's not good in Venus. It's not very breathable. Believe it or not.
So what do we want? How do you want to wrap this up, KDL?
That's a great question, Ned. I was just going to say.
Well, it seems like you. It doesn't seem.
It
doesn't seem like you guys are are optimistic about going forward. I mean, we can stop.
That's why I'm a history.
Going forward with
history. Exactly. Yeah.
That's why I do what I do.
They're related. Time is a continuum.
Yes. No.
History stops now. Like
history stops now.
That is
stops
true.
now.
History stops right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really in uncharted waters.
Correct.
I think we'll get into more optimistic viewpoints of the world next week when we discuss the Middle East and what's been going on recently with that. That's what I think.
Really optimistic.
Because when I think sunshine and rainbows, I think the Middle East.
I think of exactly.
Yeah.
I think
conflict in the Middle East.
I think of Syria. Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's you get what you pay for in this show. You come for the history talk and you stay for how the world's going to end.
Space exploration. What's the point of Voyager?
Stay for the doomsday.
That's right. It always gets there. It always ends. It always ends in a dark place. So, all right. I guess producer RA. That's all I got. If you have another banner you want to drop,
that banner was pretty lame. Only one banner. Come on.
Yeah.
I had like 3 banners.
No, I had a few.
I
saw Prince Henry. I saw the new landmass. What was the other one?
The other one was the first one. Yeah, we'll end with this one.
Oh, okay, that's right. Yeah, we'll end with that one. There you go.
We'll end with that one. So there's your age of exploration. Europeans discovering places that people have already lived. I don't know how else to wrap this up, guys. As always, it's been a pleasure.
How about maybe perhaps next week a special guest, right?
Maybe in the works, perhaps a mystery guest because I may be out in a bachelor party. So
yeah,
maybe yes. So stay tuned for that next week. Middle East special guest. As always, reach out to producer RA if you want to join the show. You have any topics you want to hear us discuss, or you would like to discuss with us. And that's all I have. Ned, cool. RA, awesome as always. Thanks. It's been a blast.